Welcome, everybody. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. If you'd like to use Zoom, you can go to the agenda and click, and also the phone number is there.
Is your volume off? And you get feedback.
Turn your Zoom down a little bit. Should be in good shape.
Are there any announcements from the committee?
Welcome the new member.
Yep, well,
Yeah.
welcome, Mike.
2 new members, actually.
Yeah,
Thank you.
welcome aboard. Perfect timing.
Any public comment from the committee?
Do you want to make any opening, welcome
Don't put
aboard?
him on the spot.
Well, if he does, he wants to say something, or?
My name's Mike Rupp. Lived in Lunenburg for 25 plus years and have a lot of spare time since my son has left for school, so figured it was time to start to give back to the town that we all know and love. Thank you for letting me be here.
Thank
Welcome.
you for coming.
Any public comment from the public?
Ron DeLucia, 181 Reservoir Road. I just wanted to ask if the members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions after each presentation. Some chairs allow it, some don't.
That's what we usually do.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, he's-
Hi,
Diana.
we're all here, wow.
Oh, boy.
Thank you.
Town manager.
Jennifer? You're up.
I'm not presenting this evening.
Oh.
I have nothing to present.
Okay.
I'm not presenting until next Thursday.
Thank you.
Anything for the finance manager? You have anything?
Ziki?
Who is he?
Just real quick, I sent the finance committee, during last meeting, there was a request to send the budget versus actuals for the last 10 years. I sent the committee budgets and actuals from FY10 to 25. Just make sure you all received that. I can forward to the new members as well tomorrow. But just make sure you have that in your files, you have that to review. I didn't do any data analysis on that, it's just the data for you.
Yes.
All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Michelle, Veterans?
Good evening to all members of the Finance Committee. My name is Michelle Durkee, and I'm the Veteran Service Officer. This is actually the first time I'm presenting to the Finance Committee. I'm not sure if the Veteran Service Department has ever presented in the town of Lunenburg to the Finance Committee. So I'm actually asked to be here this evening for my department, so forgive me for actually presenting a piece of paper to you all this evening. It's probably not orthodox, but so just forgive me and enlighten me just for just a couple minutes while I read the piece of paper to you, just to let you know a little bit about what my department does. So I am your veterans agent, and I have been in this position in Lunenburg since August of 2023. I asked to come to the meeting tonight because I have never attended a budget meeting before in this town, and I wanted to know what it was entailing. So forgive me for not capturing all the highlights that you may want to hear about, as this is my first time presenting tonight. My office provides a variety of services to the veterans and their families. One of the most obvious ones is that it helps veterans file VA claims for benefits that may be that they're entitled to. This now requires veteran service officers to be certified by the state in order to fill out claims. Not all VSOs are certified. Just so you all know, the state now requires all veteran service officers to work 1,000 hours a year. For some of us, that might be a little bit easier. I just happen to be a veteran service officer that works for multiple towns. For some veteran service officers, they only work one town. So if they work like 2 or 3 hours a week for one town, that could be a little tricky for them to get the 1,000 hours in. So in my case, I am fortunate enough to make those hours, and I am certified, but that also makes me very busy. So some people from other towns will come to me and make my office very, very busy because other towns will not have certified veteran service officers to be able to do their claims. So I will have other towns, veterans come to me to do their claims for them. This office also files Chapter 115 benefits for Lunenburg veterans only, as each town can only file their Chapter 115 benefits for that particular town. This is a monthly income if the veterans are eligible. If the veteran is single this year, that state says that it's less than $2,500 for an income. If they're married, the income has to be less than $3,400. This makes the veteran eligible. It is a reimbursement to help with out-of-pocket medical, housing, and fuel costs, even if they have fuel assistance. This also applies to the veteran's spouse if the veteran is deceased and the spouse meets that requirement, which again, if the income is less than $2,500. The office helps veterans obtain VA cards by filling out the required form, scanning it to the VA, and taking the veteran's photo. This veteran will then have their VA card mailed to them within 2 to 3 weeks. This office, mine, also helps active duty personnel prepare their claims ahead of time so they have easier times submitting their VA claims when it's their time to do so. Finally, this office is the reconciler between state and the town. That means in the months of October through December for January, and then again for the months of April through May for June, the state requires every veterans agent 2 times annual recertification for every veteran that is on Chapter 115 benefits. This involves 3 months bank statements, rent, mortgages, home insurance policies, house taxes, utilities, fuel statements, and life insurance policies. We use the dollar amounts on these forms, put them in the state system to generate a monthly total of what the veteran is eligible for benefits. I then send this forward to my authorizer, wait for an approval, which could take 2 to 3 weeks to get an approval back. But in the meantime, it is against the law to withhold my monthly benefits for these veterans. So I still must pay my monthly veteran to my veteran. If my authorizer makes modifications to the amount that I sent up, it is then my duty to reconcile the following month. I also have to make sure that every month what state approves is what the town pays out, so that town can be properly reimbursed at 75% of its Chapter 115 benefit expenditures. So this brings me to my next section. I was asked to speak to the last 5 years of my department's finances. I will speak to the monthly certifications, as that is what I have access to. I have only been in my office for a little over a year, so I may not be able to answer all of your questions. I have broken down Chapter 115 cases over the last 5 years and the recertifications. You have a printout there that I have typed out for you all. Starting December 2020, there were 11 cases. That was the approved amount and what was reimbursed. And then I followed it down all the way through December of 2024, which leaves you 6 cases approved and reimbursed. I can tell you that of all the 6 people that I currently have on Chapter 115 benefits, 4 have been on since at least 2020. One person has been on since at least 2022. Since I have been in this position, I have had to remove 3 people from Chapter 115 benefits. That is because one person has passed, one person moved into a nursing home, one person got a full-time job. And at last, I send up a monthly report to the town administrator. It shows my beginning fiscal year balance, what I have dispersed to date, my average monthly payout, and my estimated state monthly 75% reimbursement. In the time that I have been, my benefits and distributions are favorable and under budget, which is why this fiscal year 2026, the veterans' benefits can be reduced from the $97,000 that you currently see, which is on that second page that I have submitted to you guys, but now will be reduced to $77,000 because there are less than people on the Chapter 115 benefits for this coming year. If you have no questions or concerns.
So what happens if you add veterans during the year?
So right now, we have definitely money in the budget to cover people, because even at the end of the year, because it's already February, we always get more budget at the end of the year. I can honestly tell you, in the position that I've been in, I'm always turning money over at the end of the year. And we will always find money to cover those expenses anyways.
Very good.
Do you mind if I just add on to that?
Sure.
So, in talking with Michelle, I did discuss that I do believe that we can reduce this budget by the $20,000. That does leave buffer between the benefits that we're paying out, allowing for if another individual either moves to Lunenburg or becomes eligible for the program. But we would have the opportunity, if there is, say there's a whole host of folks that come in, we would have the opportunity to adjust this if we're seeing folks come in at the special or the next May.
And just for the public, could you let us, like, where your office is and what your office hours are, how to get a hold of you?
Yes, so literally my offices are on Thursday from 8 to 12 in the Ritter Building, downstairs, last door on the left. That being said, although my office's hours are just that, my cell phone number is posted on the Facebook. I answer my cell phone, and I make off hours all the time for people. So I visit them on Fridays, or they visit me. I visit them at their house and on Mondays and Fridays as well. So there's really no like set time per se to, like, there's emergencies that come up, so I don't just keep it to Thursdays because the job entails not just Thursdays.
Being flexible. Great.
I have a question, and maybe this is more for the town manager. The reimbursements come back within the same current fiscal year, or it comes back for the following fiscal year, and then it becomes part of the free cash?
It comes back the same fiscal year to the general fund.
Okay, so it's not as if you have a revolving account?
No, so it comes out of my account, and then when it comes back to the general fund. That being said, I mean, if it came out like in like maybe June, then it would probably come back, like, depending on that little layover there, but
That was going to be my next question. What is the cycle for, free cash is one thing that I'm somewhat curious about, to see how the
it would post.
cash flow, so,
So state will approve it that month, the state would approve, I mean, Izzy could probably speak to that more, but it would get approved for that June, so it depends on when it closed out, but.
So the way that it works, it's not a self-funding program, like a revolving account, similar to, like, let's say Parks, for example. It's more of a reimbursement. So the benefits are paid out, let's say October. Michelle does her reporting. In November, we receive a reimbursement check for 75%. So it's not a revolving where it's self-funding, it's more of a reimbursement from this.
okay, and that's 75. So anything that gets reimbursed So I'm really thinking of cash flow here.
Yep, yep.
So we budget the year, we lock in, I'm just going to say $100,000 for FY '26.
Yes.
But we're going to get that first reimbursement for FY '26 in January of '27 for the next year, because it'll be the October. And then that's not going to get recertified until into October 27 later on, like a year later. So the
No,
money end up
no.
coming back into us really for FY '28.
No, I understand what you're saying, but it's a monthly occurrence. So the benefits are paid 1 month. She does her reporting. It may be a month or two after, but then we get the reimbursement the month after the reporting is complete. It could be January, it could be, let's say it's October, she does it in November, we get it paid in December. It's not a set schedule, but the reimbursement goes back into the general fund as part of our revenue. It doesn't go back into the veteran services line.
Right.
Yeah. But it's not at year end, it's not after the fiscal year closes. It may be, let's say it's June, we close the fiscal year, but by then, the benefits have already been paid out well before then.
Okay.
So it really doesn't hit that fiscal year deadline.
And you would
Right.
accrue what you would, for the, even after, you would know you're going to get whatever money's coming in
Correct.
after the end of the year, but you would have already accrued for it
Correct.
before the end of the fiscal year.
Correct.
So cash flow is a little bit, but accounting-wise, it's pretty clear.
Correct.
So great for your first time.
What's that?
It's so great for your first time and under budget also.
Yeah. No, this is great, and thank you for the service you're providing to our veterans, and, you said you work for other towns as well?
Yes, ma'am.
How many other towns?
3 others,
Wow. No, that's great.
so 4 towns total.
Are you a veteran as well?
I am, for 25 years.
Well, thank you for your service as well.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
So the Council on Aging is going to reschedule, she said.
Yeah, so
We got public access, I guess.
Council on Aging.
So the agenda has Council on Aging, but we believe they're going to reschedule, correct? So the next is public access, if they're ready.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Steve Walker. I'm the chair of the Public Access Cable Committee. This was finished this afternoon, which is why I'm just passing it out to you now. And I'm fairly confident at least one of the FY numbers will be wrong. So keep an eye on it, I'll appreciate it. So the PAC mission: to establish, develop, modernize, and operate the town of Lunenburg's public, educational, and government access channels. We do have 3 channels in the town. Unfortunately, they're all standard definition at the moment. The things that we have done recently, we've improved the production quality of the town meeting. Now we use 4 cameras and we have direct inputs for presentations and the voting machine, so we get a better quality when that is put together and rebroadcast later on. We've increased the number of government meetings recorded and broadcast. We grew the amount of PAC content shared on a nationwide media database. This is a database accessible to public access groups all over the country. And we put 2 programs in particular up there, and they are taken by a number of different ones. This at least tells us our quality of programming that we produce is appropriate. We're continuing our local programming grow and significantly improve the audio in the Bilotta meeting room. That's what you're listening to right now. And when they put it in, they pointed a microphone at one of the loudspeakers, which is something you must never, ever do, and it did not get feedback. It's a very smart system. So the quality both that you hear in the Bellotto room and the audio that goes out is much improved because of this. So moving on to financial, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this. PAC is a town department. This is slide 6. But we are self-funded. So the PAC revenue, which is a franchise fee from Comcast, Comcast is the only video service provider in the town over cable. So the PAC revenue from Comcast is reserved for PAC capital improvements and operations and does not affect town budgets. So this is an enterprise fund. It's maintained separately, and we do everything we can to stay within that. Funds reserved for fitting out and equipping our new studio and other expenses. So this has been accumulating because presently we're in a temporary studio in TC Passios, and we do not want to invest in putting pipe work up to support lights and microphones, drapes, soundproofing, all this stuff. When we get our new studio, which I trust we will get sometime, then that's what this money is being reserved for. The franchise fees, this is slide 8. Cable cutting is a misnomer. Did I miss one? No, I didn't. No. The cable cutting is a misnomer. You've probably heard of cable cutting all over the place. What's really going on is people are cutting video services because the franchise fee, which in our case is the legal maximum of 5%, is for video services. So they keep the cable, they bring in the internet that way, and they use streaming services. And there's legislation wending its way slowly through Boston, which I will talk about a little later on, that may help what's going on. However, we have seen our franchise fee drop each year for the past few years. Not as much as a lot of others around, but ours does. So ours for the last calendar year was 2.4% roughly. We use that to estimate the franchise fee revenue, so that should be FY 26, not 25, my apologies. Because we can't tell exactly what it's going to be, but we're trying to put an honest assessment of what's really going on. And then there's a statement there, where it originally came from, the Cable Communications Act of '84. We're limited to a maximum of 5. When I was first involved here, we were getting 2.5%. Now we're getting 5%. We shall see what happens. Our contract is due on February the 28th, 2028. So we have about 3 years, actually almost exactly 3 years, to renegotiate the contract. And we're trying to find out what other people are succeeding in doing at the moment. So there's a slide which may or may not be readable because it's got a lot of information on, but I took the Comcast fee income from February of 21 and put it all into a table and checked the percentage change each year. A curiosity is both November of 23 and November of 24, it dropped 4%. We have no idea why they picked that quarter to drop 4%, but the other ones are like 0.7%. So I averaged this out, and right at the bottom, where the big blue arrow is, that's the estimated FY 26 number, and it's the best number I can come up with because I'm extremely poor at predicting the future. So We have in our enterprise fund quite a lot of money, which is being held in reserve for the new studio. And it was sitting there not doing much, so we asked if it could be invested. And this is done through the Treasurer's Department in the town and a company called Bartholomew. And essentially, these are the numbers. We started it in June of 23. We put 720,000 into this fund. So it's still the enterprise fund. It's just where it's housed. And we've been getting about $35,000 a year out of that fund, but we reinvest it. It stays in the fund. So compound interest is a wonderful thing. So on slide 11, our anticipated income is 146,000. We get interest from the rest of our enterprise fund from the town, which is about 13,000 a year. And we have the investment interest of 35,000. Retained earnings essentially is almost all our enterprise fund. It's the way enterprise funds work. So it has to be requalified by the state. The number there I don't have at this point, but it has no real effect on the day-to-day running and the annual budget, as long as there's sufficient. So of all the money together, it's about $1 million. That's pretty much what it's going to take to properly equip a studio and all the other pieces that need to go with that. So the total income that we're using as our best at this time is 194,656. And the next slide, my apologies, is almost unreadable, but it's mainly there, so if you have specific questions, I can answer them. But the one after it, number 13, slide 13, has a summary on it. So this is the slide I generally find more useful because other people have already gone through line by line. So the salaries, we have one full-time employee, one part-time employee, and we have a number of videographers. For them, I had to estimate the indirect costs because I don't have the real numbers there. So I added 5% to the health. I'm not sure if that was a good number. So that number will vary a little once we get the real statement of indirect costs. They're the ones that cover pension, health care, Social Security, all those other bits and pieces. Operations, so that's all the stuff we need to actually run, 23,650, giving us a total expense of 194,872. Income being 194,656 leaves us a shortfall of $216, which I'm sure I could have adjusted the numbers slightly to make that a zero, but that wouldn't be the right way of doing it. The capital is not in this budget this way. Let me explain what that is and why that is. We are not spending capital as far as we can help at this point, as I explained before. But if the machine in the little room at the back there, it's called a Castus, principal server that runs the entire system, if that fails, that's $20,000 to $25,000 to replace. And the problem is, if we don't put that somewhere in the budget, we would have to wait for the next town meeting to have it approved to put a new one in. And that's not a good process if we want to put it in Tuesday of next week. So A, we hope it doesn't quit, and B, that 30,000 that is in there, so this is a catastrophic failure fund, if you like, is going to need to come directly out of the enterprise fund instead of coming out of our income. Is that making sense? Oh. In fact, the next slide, 14, basically says the same as I just explained. So we're using the reserve funds for budgeted capital expenses. It is primarily for capital expenses anyway, so we're not doing anything wrong there. And the fund is reserved for the use and provision of the 3 channels that we use in the town, and programming and the meetings that are copied. So from this you'll see, A, we just about balance if everything comes together correctly. B, the capital, if needed, would come directly out of the enterprise fund. And C, income from Comcast is decreasing quarter by quarter and year by year. So let me, on slide 15, there's a lot of information, but there is a bill going through the town, through the city of Boston, through the state, which is assessing a fee on streaming. They're still using the same rights of way that led to the Cable Act of '84, giving us this 5%, or whatever was negotiated. This bill will assess a fee on streaming entertainment companies for their use of public rights of way, which will be used to fund community media efforts. We'd like to get as many legislators as possible co-signing on this bill, and we have actually had the select board send a letter in the past. This has been wending its way through for probably 3 years now, and it gets a little further each time. One of the difficulties is nobody is able to predict how much money will come from that, but the principle of the legislation is not a windfall. The principle of the legislation is that public media gets back to their best 3 years of income. So they would take up the slack, if you like, from what the franchise fees weren't paying. So it says the legislation is for Massachusetts only. It's one solution for the state, so we don't need a town-by-town contract. Right now, each contract is negotiated individually by town. Our contract, as I said, expires in 2028. The fee on using rights of way for delivering of streaming video services, those monies would go 20% to the state general fund, 40% to municipalities, and 40% to community media. That's one of the sticking points right now there. One of the numbers that they're having fun with as they try to bring this together. It's hopeful it'll get into committee in about 2 weeks' time. So other states and municipalities have already imposed these fees, so this has been done in other places. We're not coming up with something new. And the other thing I'd like to just bring up is we had ARPA funding, and we used it for 3 particular things, and I believe we spent all of it, which was part of our charter. The videographer kits, which videographers go out to various places, they carry with them cameras, tripods. We had new ones made up with proper lighting and better audio systems. The studio was upgraded with broadcast switches and studio quality cameras. They pick up and move to the new studio. Not an issue with them being installed in that way. They just have a lot of cables. And there are different microphones set up. And the broadcast audio, as I mentioned before, replacement of the Bellotta room speakers and an upgrade in the control room back here that manages the audio from these speakers, all your microphones, mine, and we have another set of wireless microphones in case you need to be working at the table as a workshop. And then he sent in the warrant. Now, I don't know what wording is going to be needed, but this is the wording we've used the past few years. I don't know whether it'll be changed this year. The interim town manager thought it should have real numbers in there. It hasn't been done that way, so I'm going to wait and see what's necessary. But we have this here as a placeholder. So if anyone has any questions or comments or...
I had just a couple quick questions. One, back on the modernization, the state funding. it says 40% municipal and 40% community media.
Yeah,
Would PAC be the community media
Yes.
part, and then would the actual town get?
no,
General fund?
I get the rest.
So you get 80%? Is that, no, I mean, it says municipal, is that general
Municipal
fund?
is you guys. It's-
The general fund,
Right, so that's the general fund. 40% is for media, which is PAC.
right.
And 20% apparently is the costs to the state for collecting this money. I'd collect checks for free, actually, but, you know.
The other question I had was, under the list of budget requests, it had grant, indirect costs. What are those things, like indirect?
I have no idea why the word grant is there. So those are the indirect costs from healthcare for employees.
Okay,
And
so it's not
so-
grant.
Yeah, we were given that list, so we used the spreadsheets we've been using for the last 10 years, and then had to map it into the spreadsheet we were given. So we do have enormous spreadsheets if you ever wanted to see them. I don't want to see them ever again. So,
So under the income,
yes,
you said that, you're predicting is going to be on the actuaries predicted for 23, 24. You're predicting 146 for FY '26. FY '25 was 159. But when I look at the revised budget, original proposition, revised budget, so this is for FY '26?
yes.
Okay. So the 194 that now is 146 is for FY '26, not from...
That's our best estimate of what it would be.
Okay. My other question is, what is the town interest? Why did you name it interest? Is it...
Well, the fund has approximately $1 million in it. We put into the investment fund of Bartholomew, we only put 720,000 in. The reason being they're in short-term bonds, and if we were all of a sudden given our studio space, then we would want at least some money to get started on it, because releasing the money to do the new studio space properly, we'll have to go through town meeting.
Right.
So the other whatever it is, 280 is held in town funds. I don't know where they keep it, and that's interest derived from that money.
Oh, okay. So this is funds, they're PAC money that's being held
Yes.
by town.
It's still enterprise money, but wherever the treasurer's department keeps it.
Understood. There is a 12% increase in salaries from, oh, this is just proposed, sorry. I thought this was yours. Never mind.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else?
Is there any increase, meaningful increase between FY '25 and FY '26?
Increase for?
Just the overall budget, like, we're not seeing the FY '25 budget with FY
Right.
'26. We're just seeing FY '26.
There is a slight increase because there are changes in steps on the salaries.
Okay,
Medical, we don't know where that's going to go to, so that was an increase as well.
okay.
Most of the rest, we did everything we could to keep it the same or very similar.
Okay.
So if you like, those are the compulsory increases. We didn't put any discretionary ones.
Okay.
Is there any studies on, like, if this passes for the Community Media Act, what kind of funding would that bring in?
We have absolutely no idea. First off, the streaming companies won't release their information. Secondly, no one knows where the legislation's going to end up because it would be a percentage that they will come up with. Right now, they're talking of having a committee that reviews this every year and tries to work out what that percentage should be each year. I'm truly grateful I'm not part of this process, but nobody knows. There's a group called Mass Access, which is a collective, if you like, of all the public access in Massachusetts. And this question's just been coming up, and people are trying to do their best at generating numbers. But the bottom line is they've got no basis to move forward on. But the principle of it, if it sticks, is to make us whole for our best 3 years of income. So it's not a windfall, so all of a sudden we get a bunch more. We're supposed to be made whole, and our best 3 years of income were around about 4 years ago. We were getting the peak one, I think, was 52,000. Right now, we're down at 46,000.
Now, to get profit sharing from that, I mean, would you have to also have your stations on those streaming services?
Oh, no, that's not the way it works. It's the other way around. The streaming services occupy bandwidth on the Comcast cable system.
Right.
Comcast also gives us 3 channels, and we put our information on the 3 and send it out. So they're not related together.
Okay.
Madam Chair, last year, I had requested from the previous chair that after each presentation, the public be given the opportunity to ask questions. So I don't know if this is a practice that we want to extend this year.
Sure.
Any public comments?
Ron DeLucia, 181 Reservoir Road. I just have a question about the PAC employees. I remember a few years ago, the videographers were determined to be town employees.
1099s, yeah.
Oh, they're 1099s. They're not on the SAP.
Whatever that is. Right now, they're employees, not contractors.
Oh. So I would like to know if they are,
Sorry, unbenefited.
okay, unbenefited, but we did just change the SAP. So if they're on the SAP, are all of them getting all the benefits that we just approved at town meeting as part-time employees, like paid holidays?
Is there only one full-time employee? The others are all non-benefited?
They're right, they're,
But didn't we just pass on the SAP that employees who work 20 hours and less at the last town meeting?
I don't think it would defer to the town manager.
I voted no on it, so I'm pretty sure we did, and there was a
It
pretty
is-
good discussion.
I believe it's 20 hours. That's my recollection of. If you
There-
work more than
Hours.
20, then you can have benefits.
20 hours a week or 20 hours a month?
A week.
A week. So there are
state law,
nuances
isn't
on when that would apply. I think it was things related to if you're scheduled to work on that day, if you're not scheduled.
Right.
So they work on demand. I don't believe it would apply, but I think that's a really good question. And I think that's a question that we should ask the HR for clarification.
Because I haven't seen the SAP itself for years, the actual document, so I'm just wondering how, I know the PAC manager and probably the person under the PAC.
Technician Eric, yeah.
Yes, is probably on the SAP, but
Oh, they should be.
I
The
I
others-
wanted to check about all the other, because you have many videographers, and I'm just getting concerned about, once you build the studio and spend that money that you've been collecting interest on, you're going to lose that interest as part of your operating
Right.
budget. So I'm just concerned about the numbers.
Me too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that if nothing changes, if that bill that you were talking about doesn't pass, Comcast is going to be sending the town and you less and less dollars. So you're going to be in a situation in a few years where
Right.
you will not be able to run the business on Comcast money, even with some money in the savings account already to
Right.
cover.
But the town is being given the opportunity to help us because they really like our services. All good?
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Library?
Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
Pleasure to be in front of you again. I apologize. I didn't realize that Chris would not be here tonight, so I sent my presentation to him, and hopefully we've got it ready in the back. My name is Mior Hammond. I am the director of the Lunenburg Public Library. And
There,
there's the presentation. You guys can see that. So if you go to the second slide, I've got a little outline of what I'll talk to you about tonight. Forgive me for coming in late. We had a trustee meeting before this, so we had a nice chat over at the library. And so I'll tell you a little bit about the library mission. Our big highlight right now is our teen room renovation, which is ongoing. I'll talk you through a few statistics from this year and previous years. Talk about library budget numbers this year and in the past. Some of the things that we've used outside funds for this year. Talk about goals for FY26. Some of the digital trends, which are very important these days. And usually there are a couple questions about that from the Finance Committee. And then I'll talk about some of our budget requests and the rationale behind them. And then the unofficial interim town manager recommended budget for the library. And of course, final thoughts and questions. Next slide, please. The mission of the Lunenburg Public Library is that the library welcomes all and serves residents of the Lunenburg area as a hub for the community, enriching our lives through its collections, programs, services, facility, and people. Now you can see the picture of the library. We've got a brand new sign on front of the building for the first time. The facility is now 20 years old. This will be the 20th year the building has been in service, and the first full year that we've had a sign on the front. Next slide, please. I've got a couple pictures here. One of progress from last week with the construction, and then an artist rendition of the renovation that is currently happening. So we're expanding the teen room. The town was generous enough to, or the select board was generous enough to allocate more than $119,000 of ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act funds, to the library or to projects at the library. And currently we're expanding the teen room. Although I had hoped we could expand it more, it's slotted to be about a 40% increase in floor space to the teen room. We're losing the director's office, but building a new one. Not expanding the footprint of the actual building itself. This is all work happening inside the original shape of the building. So we do lose a little bit of shelf space, which is always at a premium, but the impact will more than outweigh that sacrifice. The other component, small component, is that we have already redone the floor of the story craft room as part of this project. So the children's room programming area has a new floor. And if you've never visited, we have this incredible beam projector system, which is an interactive digital literacy system that helps teach kids some digital literacy. Essentially, it works like a giant iPad. Projector projects games onto the floor, and they can march around and stomp and play games. So the floor will help work even better moving forward. So next slide, please, is some statistics about how business has been going at the library. The first one is our number of visitors. Last year was the highest total since before 2019. So that's before the pandemic. We had almost 66,000 visitors last year through our front doors. And currently, we are projected to have almost 67,000 visitors this fiscal year. Obviously, 4 months to go, you never know what happens. But that's good news. The library is busy and active. Another example of that is our programming. Our last full year, FY24, we did put on more than 327 programs. More than 6,000 people attended those programs and learned or were educated or entertained in some way or another. One of the stalwart statistics of note, physical circulation. So this is how many times physical objects have been borrowed from the library. In FY24, our last full year, we had 76,900 items circulate, physical items. That was up about 5,000 above FY23. And right now we're projected to have 88,300 circulations this year. So that's up quite a bit.
What?
Are you hosting?
No.
The value of that material that's circulated through February of this year is about $750,000 value. In FY19, just for perspective, the total value, so 4 more months than that, was just under $1 million. So e-circulations is the next statistic, and so that's the other component of borrowing things from the library, digital files or e-books, e-audiobooks as well. FY24, which was last year, was a record high. 26,500 digital items were borrowed. This year, we've added a number of resources to what we're offering, and the projected number does not incorporate those new resources, but we're projecting just over 23,000 electronic circulations. Our summer reading program, which is really the highlight of our year, the busiest time for the library, we had almost 300 children read 222,000 minutes. So that's part of what the mission of the summer reading program is, to bridge the time between school years. You know, a lot of progress that students make during the school year can be lost during the summer when they are away from the classroom. And so the library helps to bridge that time and give, especially focus on reading, but we also offer a lot of program and events during that time. We also had 28 teen readers read more than 70,000 minutes, and 74 adult readers participated, reading more than 130,000 minutes. Very exciting component of last year's summer reading was a free lunch program that we brought back for a long time through Project Bread and some government funding, state and federal funding. We were able to offer some free lunches during the summer reading program. 3 years ago, Lunenburg lost its eligibility for that program. And this past summer, Main Street Bank sponsored that free lunch program and helped us deliver about 650 free lunches as part of our summer reading. Next slide, please. So basic budget numbers to consider. Our FY25 total municipal library budget is $591,860. So if you think back to that statistics slide, the value of material circulated just this year through 8 months was more than that. FY24, so the last full calendar year, other departments on behalf of the library, so that's DPW paying for trash and building cleaning and other things, and also benefits for employees. The spending was $163,968. And in FY25, we have access, obviously, to a number of ARPA project funding. So our total outside funds that we're using this fiscal year, we anticipate to be $288,800. So that's a total, approximate amount for FY25 to be just over $1 million for the library. Those outside funds do include a large amount of dollars paid by the Friends of the Library, the nonprofit that supports our mission. They often, many years, contribute $40,000 to $50,000 through their operating funds, paying for things on behalf of the library. They also often make gifts from their endowment to pay for special things like the beam projector system that I mentioned earlier. One thing when we're talking about library budgets to remember is that our state board, the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, has a state aid certification where they have certain requirements that the library has to kind of operate to maintain certification, which is one of the requirements to share resources between communities, which in Massachusetts we have world-class networks, and those resource sharing agreements between libraries and municipalities is spectacular. You can, anything you want to read or watch or listen to, you are likely to be able to borrow from the library, and that is because of that set of networks. So we don't always have it on our shelves in Lunenburg, but we can almost always find it and borrow it from another community. And so part of that requirement to retain our certification is a minimum appropriation from the municipality. It's calculated with a fairly complicated formula. The gist of it is that the required amount increases by about 2.5% every year. That's not the exact calculation. So it actually takes the average of the previous 3 years and increases that average by 2.5% every year, and that's the requirement. So that requirement for FY26 is $549,755. Our budget requests for FY26 totaled $645,617, and I will talk about some of those requests in just a minute. The interim town manager recommended budget totaled just under $625,000. And part of the discussion that I'll have is the differences between those two budgets, and certainly my feelings about how that will impact library services. Next slide, please. So just quickly to review some of the things we used outside funds for, and also some of those sources for outside funds for your reference. ARPA is obviously a big component this year, spending that on teen room renovation. We also painted and repaired some of the exterior of the building, which was in rough shape. We also repaired the water feature that's a part of the Proctor Memorial Garden behind the library, which is a really spectacular space, excellent for mindfulness practice. We also use it for story times when the weather is cooperative, certainly not during February, but we are looking forward to doing that in this late spring. The Friends, as I mentioned, also often contribute tens of thousands of dollars to the library. This year, they're supporting things like programming, special technology resources, refreshments for programs, and at events. They've also pledged $20,000 for the contingencies on the teen room renovation project, and more than $14,000 to help purchase some furniture to supplement that renovation. Every year we also receive state aid funds that is related to that certification and some minimum service requirements, hours that were open, and spending requirements as well. State aid we often use for technology needs, upgrading devices, periodical subscriptions, and electronic databases. This year, we will receive just over $34,000 in state aid monies. And then we also have a revolving and gift fund. Those monies tend to be less than $5,000 total, and that money is often collected for overdue materials. We are now collecting money into that revolving fund for copies that happen. We use 10 cents a page for copies and prints at the library. Is a very reasonable price. And that money goes to pay for some of the supplies to do that. We use it for periodical subscriptions as well, and often replace materials out of those funds. Next slide, please. Just quickly, I'll highlight a couple of our big goals for next year. These all come from our strategic plan that covers FY22 to FY27. So obviously we're pretty far along in that time frame. And one of the big goals is to ensure that the community views the library as a community hub. Our vision being that the LPL fosters strong community development by meeting some of the demand for a central meeting location, by providing a place and services that connect people, and helping to bridge divides throughout the community. And I think we're doing an excellent job of that. The sheer number of programs that are happening at the library is fairly incredible. And we have a programming staff of 6 people essentially that work on putting on the programs. And we have a program virtually every day that we're open. Most days we have multiple programs happening, some for children, some for adults, some for teens. So there's almost always something happening at the library beyond quiet reading or studying. And I do think the library is an important hub for the community. Many community groups also use the space for their meetings. We have a few homeowners associations. We have Boys Scouts and Girl Scouts. All sorts of groups come to the library. Other government committees and boards meet at the library as well. One of the other important goals that we have moving forward is it comes around staffing. 2 years ago, we opened for the first time on Friday. We're open for 4 hours Friday afternoon, 2 to 6. That's one of our busiest times. And what's become apparent is that we could use a little more staffing. And one of our requests this year was around that. And I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about that. But I think our plan moving into FY26 is to perform a more formal study of staffing levels at the library, to bring that data back to groups like the Finance Committee so that we can really talk about what the library needs rather than applying a Band-Aid or a short-term fix and then continuing to come back and ask for more staff or alternate organizations of our staff. So we'll plan on presenting some data around that for next budget cycle. The last, and I think one of the really important goals that I'll mention tonight, is new and underserved populations. And so that really, those groups are people who are maybe tangentially related to the library. They've come to one program, or they know something that's happening at the library, or maybe they've borrowed an item, but they don't use the library to the max of its potential. So that's an important target for us. And the other part of that is new library users. So either they're new to town, or they don't use the library because they think all we have is books. And so outreach is a big component there. Going to places like the farmers market, the artisans market, talking to people who think, what do I need the library for? And I think that really comes down to our belief that the library can provide something of value to everyone in the community. It's not easy always to identify what that might be, but through conversations we can gather data and personalize some of that service so that everyone can benefit from the library. Next slide, please. Just quickly before I get into our requests and the rationale behind them, I did want to show you this trend, which is our, the trends of our digital usage. And so this is just for the last really 5 years, 5 full fiscal years that we have, FY19 to FY24. So the numbers of circulations of ebooks and e-audiobooks has more than doubled in that time, from just over 10,000 to more than 26,000 this past year. That also, if Mr. Gray, I think you remember several years ago, we talked about licensing around ebooks and e-audiobooks and how For libraries, those items are some of the most expensive things that we purchase. And they're one of the cheapest to reproduce. All you have to do is click a button. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But the other thing that we've seen since the pandemic, and continuing even after the effects of the pandemic are really kind of died down, electronic resources are being used more and more. And so there's a bit of, rubbing that happens there. They're the most expensive. They're also increasing in usage. And we've got to buy those things so that people can actually use them in Lunenburg. All right, next slide, please. So I'll just talk a little bit about, do you all have access to the budget request that we made for FY26? As I go through these, I'll tell you the numbers so that you have a reference point then. So the majority of the library budget, between 60 and 70% in any given year, it goes to salaries.
Is
Yes,
that a
Anna.
one-pager that maybe we can make 6 copies over there?
Yes.
Like, do we know how to make copies on that? Just because it's really hard to follow here. Okay. Maybe make a couple more for people that are watching, because it's hard to see it. I wouldn't be able to follow numbers.
10 cents.
Thank you.
All right, now we're back in action.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for this suggestion. So for FY26, in our staff salaries, as I was mentioning, 60 to 70% of the library budget in any given year goes to staff salaries. We have 13 employees. 3 of those employees are usually high school age library pages. They work like 3 hours a night, so pretty small in the grand scheme. But we do have 10 other adults who work between 19 and 40 hours a week. The total request that we made for salaries was $446,000 and about $200 more dollars there. That includes a 10% increase for clerical union and SAP employees as part of the ongoing kind of upgrades to those pay rates. It includes $850 for longevity. So that's one person who's been here for more than 10 years. It includes a request to fund a vacant library assistant position at 19 hours a week at, I think it's step 5, grade 5, step 1, which adds up to $800,831. So totals $446,000 there for salary. Without that formal staffing study that I mentioned in our plans, I think we recognize, even without that, we recognize the need for additional staff at the library. There are times over the last 2 or 3 years that we have had to close the library due to an illness and not having enough staff to call in to safely supervise the library. We have an operational safety policy that does require us to have 3 people at any point in the building. It is, and I think that's an appropriate requirement. It's a 15,000 square foot facility. It's all on one floor, lines of sight are not conducive to seeing the entire facility at any point. And you do need multiple people to make sure that when an accident happens, you can maintain safety. So that requirement aside, you know, just illnesses have certainly impacted library service. And so there is a need to address that. I am looking forward to a more formal study about the other needs around staffing, but that's where this request really comes from, is the need to have another head to call in and work with when we do have illnesses, which always happens during cold and flu season especially. Moving on to technology, I did want to, although it's not a formal request in the library budget, I did want to talk about our IT plan for the library. We have worked with the IT department to come up with a plan for our regular replacements of all the equipment that we use at the library. And on that plan, we have about $13,500 worth of replacements that we would like to make. That is not a request for our budget, but it is something that we are hoping will be allocated in the IT department. So I do think it's worth talking about as we are talking about the library needs. The next step as we're going down through the library budget that we get to is a clump of utilities. So sewer, water, electricity, heating, and that is an area where, especially sewer and water, where we, based on our FY25 run rate, we would need a slight increase there. In our list of requests, we did knock off a few $1,000s on the electricity and heating charges. And you'll see when we get to the recommended town manager recommended budget, interim town manager recommended budget, that those decreases did not carry through to that stage. Part of what we're seeing this year is solar credits for the town that are allocated to the library have very positively impacted the expenses for electricity. We've had a number of HVAC issues over the last couple of years, and repairs have been made, and I think efficiency has increased there. But when we're talking about planning for heating, we certainly don't want to have to worry about that. So.
I'm sorry, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
The column original appropriation, is that FY25?
Yes.
Okay.
That's FY25. The revised budget is the FY25 revised budget. So that includes changes, I think, that were made at special town meeting and at annual town meeting as far as pay grades for SAP and clerical union.
The final number for FY25 is the revised budget?
Revised budget is FY25, yes.
Okay.
And then our request is the next column, FY26
Right.
request.
And is that revised budget, does it have any line item transfers that have been made, or like other, so we only have had special town meetings since the appropriation. So what is the revised?
Just looking quickly at it, the big difference is in salaries, the third line down, staff salaries. So
Okay.
$8,000 added there. Which goes back, and that looks like
Okay.
the only change to me. It's $8,000.
All right, that seems to be the only change,
Yeah,
okay.
and I think that is,
And that
I
was,
think that's SAP, basically.
that's SAP change, okay.
Yep.
Which was approved, okay, that makes
Yep.
sense. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. All right, so next slide. The other big decrease in our requests that's worth mentioning is our CW Mars assessment. So on the sheet you guys are looking at, that no one at home can see, this is the internet access line, 531021. It's about 2/3 of the way down. This is the money that we pay to CW Mars, our library network, central and western part of the state, more than 150 libraries. It's our membership fee. Part of that assessment is an amount that they call a membership fee. There's also fees for use of the shared catalog of ebooks and e-audiobooks. Some of it is for it correlates to the amount of usage of the courier service that shares materials between libraries. And there are a number of other small pieces. Our internet connection our fiber line is actually through CW Mars. It's a very dependable line, and all of our public access and staff computers are on that fiber line. So we do pay for that. And part of the change there is related to that fiber line. CW Mars, on our behalf, files for E-rate discounts on that expense. And as of July 1st, as a result of the plan to switch over to the voice over internet protocol phones, we did increase the line speed of that connection by quite a bit. I'm sorry, this is July 1st of 2023, 2 years ago, the previous FY24. All these numbers, everybody's going cross-eyed. So 2 years ago, basically, and the E-rate discount has a little bit of a lag behind that. And so associated with that increase of speed, we have an increase of E-rate discount that's coming into effect this year, even though we've had that increase of speed for almost 2 years now. So, are you following me so far? Okay. Complicated, I think. Long story short, this year our assessment is actually going down, even though we are in the midst of adjusting our membership to CW Mars to what they call a full membership, which has to do with our town population, which I think we all know as of the last census was over 11,000 people, almost 12,000 people. And CW Mars has a membership cutoff at 10,000. So in those intervening 10 years, we moved from discounted membership to full membership. And they, allowed us to incrementally increase that membership fee component up from $2,800 to $8,000 over 5 years. So we're currently, I think, going into our 4th year of that increase, even though overall the assessment goes down for FY26. Long story short, we save $1,000 in that line. Next year, though, it will go up again, most likely, unless there's a huge impact on library services and some of those components really dip, which is very unlikely. We also, the program line, 530000, we also made a request there to increase that to $21,000 for FY26. That would match the funding for programs to the year that we earned an LSTA, Library Services and Technology Act grant of about $13,000. Programming is a core service of the library. People expect it to happen. It's a big component of how people are interacting with the library and engaging with what we offer. It's one of the most effective ways to educate, entertain, and inform our community through the library. And people expect it to happen, especially in the children's room. We constantly hear requests for more programming to happen, more Miss Debbie, more Miss Jocelyn, more story times, more STEM programming for our youngsters. And so in an effort to meet some of that need, we did request $21,000 for programs. That would be $6,000 more than FY25. Next slide, please. So the only other component before I get to recommended budget, when we are thinking of library budget requests, is our library materials expenditure requirement. So that's the other big difference in our FY26 requests, our library materials line. As part of those certification requirements that I mentioned earlier, the equivalent of 16% of the appropriated budget must be spent on library materials. And essentially what library materials means, that means items that will be circulated or used by members of the public. So the books, DVDs, computers that are used by the public, the software that's used, the digital resources that we offer, databases, Ancestry online, those items. Those all qualify as those expenses. But that amount does need to be 16% of the appropriated budget. So when we make our requests, that library materials line, we request an amount that will allow us to meet that requirement and expend 16% of our budget on library materials. So I'll just quickly run through the recommended budget here, which totals $625,000. Instead of funding the vacant library assistant position, our former interim town manager suggested that we set up floating hours, what he called. So essentially funding for 100 hours where we can call in a member of our current staff to cover time when we might otherwise have to close the library because we have insufficient people to maintain safety at the building. The average pay rate for our library staff is more than $25, but it's about $25. And so 100 hours at $25, $2,500 to fund those floating hours and keep the library open. We took out the $18,000 request for library assistant, kept in longevity and the other contractual obligations for staff salary, increased the water and sewer amounts. So for the committee who's looking at the copy of my paper list, this is the last column all the way to the right that I'm going through. Small increases to sewer and water, maintaining electricity and heating charges, maintaining just about everything else, adding a small amount to programs, $1,000 there, and then the corresponding amount in the library materials line. And I think that adding the floating hours was a nice suggestion from a very experienced town manager that would be beneficial to the staff. This essentially allows the library to continue functioning the way that we currently do. When we have people who are sick, we call our current staff to come in extra. For the first time in more than 2 years, we're at full staff. In past years, when we've done this, we've had a surplus in our staff salaries because of vacancies. So we've had funding already to pay for these extra hours, what will become floating hours. But we're at full staff, so knock on wood, if we can maintain full staff, we won't have that surplus. And we would not be able to fund extra hours for anyone to come in. The increase to our programming budget is negligible, but would be appreciated. We would likely need to rely on outside funds in a much more concerted way, grants, state aid, Friends of the Library, to pay for things like some of our periodical subscriptions, online databases, and every year we still do rely on the Friends to pay for some programming, a lot of programming actually, thank you Friends. We would also plan that formal workflow study and present data for the next budget cycle about library staffing. And that way we would have some hard data to talk about some of those staffing needs. So, next slide. What questions do you have for me? How can I answer?
I had one overall arching question.
Yes.
You get some money from the state and through foundations and things like that.
Yes.
With the way things are with the federal government, and some of the state money comes from the federal government, some
Yes.
of the money from the other not-for-profits, they get money from the federal government.
Yes.
What are you hearing? Is it going to be realistic to get more, or is it, we're just hoping to keep the same, or should we expect a decrease?
I haven't heard any good news. To give you a simple answer, one of the things that I talked about was our LSTA grant that we received 2 years ago. That's money from the state that's dispersed by the IMLS, which is the National Museum and Library organization, and that is federal funding essentially. Likely that will be impacted. We are in the process of applying for that LSTA grant for the next cycle. In any case, we are proceeding as if those grants will be funded. I think that's pretty unlikely. The project that we're proposing with that funding, one of the requirements of that funding is that it doesn't fund, that specific federal funding doesn't fund normal library operations. So it's kind of like an extra project. We are proposing to do a $10,000 civic engagement project over the course of 12 months from October to October. I think it's pretty unlikely that will happen. I'm currently looking at, I would say, about 6 other grants, and those range from $2,000 to many more $1,000. I think some of those are more likely to happen. Some of those are more private organizations. One is through Emerson Hospital and a gift that they received. It's a community service grant, and we're currently hoping to work with the Adult Activity Center to provide memory kits with that grant if that goes through. But that's, you're piecing small things together at that stage. Certainly every year grants are part of what we look at and try to earn. But I think especially for libraries, there's a lot of pessimism about the possibility of any federal funding coming our way, unfortunately.
Other not-for-profits are seeing this?
Other not-for-profits, I think my impression is that they'll certainly be impacted as well. I think many of them have other sources of funding besides the federal. There is certainly a big component there, but the Community Foundation is another place we often look for grants. There's a BEMIS grant that every year we usually get $1,000 from that grant. So private employers who have also participate in that often are sources for funding too. But again, $1,000 at a time. It's not the most efficient way to piece together significant funding. It's definitely a possibility.
Right. And if some of these funds don't appear this year, would you just have to make hard choices in the budget? And is it programs or people or both? Or
I don't think we would have to make any hard decisions around people. And I think one of the real strengths of librarians in general is making do with very little. And often that, that doesn't do us justice when we come to situations where we're advocating for funding for libraries. But I think we can be very creative in how we approach things. One of the things my staff has been practicing over the last few years is coming up with programming, especially craft programming, art and craft type programming, which is at the moment very popular. Coming up with those programs in-house. Teens in particular is a great example. Our teen librarian has made little take and make craft kits where someone donated a bunch of mostly metal canisters, little boxes, and the teen advisory board and the teen librarian worked together to fill those boxes with craft supplies, so little mini, not easel, but canvas and painting supplies. And those are very popular and they go out very quickly, and they cost very little because you're relying on donations, you're relying on putting together some supplies that are hanging around, as it were. And so there's a lot of that we can do. Obviously, that you can't do that with everything. You can't do that with an expert in biology who might come and talk about the native species in town. You do still have to pay some of those presenters to bring their expertise, but I think it would demand us to continue to be creative, and I don't think the grants and generosity of nonprofits and similar giving entities would necessarily force us into a really bad spot. I think although there's pessimism around that funding, I think what gets cut are some of those luxury, that's maybe not the best choice to describe it, but it gives you a sense of the type of things that might be lost. Those luxury programs. STEM is unfortunately a great example of that. When we think of STEM programming, we're talking about most of the time an expert in science, technology, engineering, math coming to teach kids robotics, for example. BattleBots we had Wednesday afternoon at the library, 2 sessions where kids learned some robotics. They got to drive around little robots and try to pop balloons on the other kids' robots. So it's a fun, entertaining, educational program, which is exactly what we try and do. Unfortunately, you can only do a certain number, you can only accommodate a certain number of attendees. And for that, it's 12 at a time because you only have 12 robots. And they tend to be, per seat, quite a bit more expensive than, say, a lecturer who comes in and tells us about the history of Plymouth Rock or whatever. So there's a balancing there, and some of those per seat more expensive programs, that might be where we would be making difficult choices. Certainly it would be an impact, but I think when you think about the real fear of what might happen, it's the significance is on the lighter end. Long answer, I'm sorry. I do go on when it comes to the library, I apologize. What else are you wondering about?
Top line.
Top line.
Contract not set for FY26 in the salary section there. Is it safe to say that number will be increasing for FY26?
Yes.
Okay.
We signed the contract tonight.
Okay.
It is a 7% increase.
All right. So that 12% increase overall would go up even higher than
it would. I honestly, I'd have to chat with Madam Town Manager about exact implications. Obviously, we are in a tight budget situation. So
that's why I'm asking.
I'm not sure that I can adequately answer that at this time. She's been working hard, long hours, trying to grasp the whole entirety of the budget. And I think there are a number of ways we could handle that.
Okay.
I would love to see that not impact any of the other budget lines, but I haven't had that conversation yet, so I don't think I can answer.
Okay. And just out of curiosity's sake, you said you have 66,000 visitors.
Yep.
Any idea how many unique visitors you have to the library?
Our people counter is pretty accurate as far as people coming in and out of the library. It's got a camera and it analyzes traffic patterns, right? And it's got the zone where if you pass through the zone, it counts as one visitor.
Right.
Counts one in, doesn't count one out. So it's a single count for every person in or out, in and out. We see a lot of students at the library, so there's a lot of in and out traffic when it comes to those demographics. I think a lot of the other demographics, they're coming to the library, going in and out the front doors once. But there is definitely some non-unique counting happening when one group of teenagers comes in, puts their backpack down, goes to get a snack at the corner store, and then comes back to hang out for a little bit.
But as far like,
I don't have a hard
not just
number.
like the turnstile effect, right?
Yeah.
But like, if you have 66,000
Individual,
people-
like
yeah.
actual people who.
Yeah, like, is the library serving 500 people? Is it serving 5,000 people?
Yeah, great question. The data that I can give you maybe would be library cards. We have about 5,500 library cards.
Okay.
Not all of those are actively used every week, every month even.
Right.
Some of those are pretty inactive users. That also doesn't capture people who come in for just a program. And one of the things that we see with programs in particular, we see people who don't come and borrow books come to our programs. They come for a program instead of a book.
But on those, you do have their count.
We do have the count, but we're talking about different groups
Right.
too. So when we're talking about individuals who come and engage with the library, I would love hard data on that, but I don't have it right now.
I was just curious. I mean, it doesn't really.
So,
affect what I'm thinking.
like the Council on Aging, the Lunenburg Adult Activity Center, they have when you come in,
Yep.
you can just, even if you're not doing anything, you just, if you're coming to have a cup of tea with your friend,
Yeah.
you can just scan,
Yep.
and it, it marks the reg. So then they do have data of how many people are in, unique people are in, how many
Yeah. I
Is
think
that something that other libraries have done, no?
that's really, I think that comes down to missions. And when you talk about libraries, I think part of what we try to accomplish is that we're supporting not just people who live in town necessarily. Sometimes there are visitors driving through town, and one of the first places they visit is the library. So the library is in some ways a gateway to the community for outsiders as well. When we go back to the mission statement, we welcome all. So I mean, that kind of, I'm digressing from your question. I
Right.
apologize for that. But there are many people who use library services who, if you had to sign in and be tracked, I think they would not use the library. There is also the confidentiality of library use, which is required by Mass General Law, that it's data that we protect. So the equivalent of that sign-in, I think, creates a lot of data that you'd have to safeguard to protect that confidentiality.
Okay.
I think the library card is as equivalent as you
And
can
what
get.
is, how many unique cards of the 5,500 cards that you have, how many of those are active within the year?
Within the year?
Yeah, like because let's say the 66,000 that you gave, let's pretend that they are there was a movement with a library card, which was, and like you said, a lot of your customers are students that come in after school and they're there. I mean, that's when the library is the busiest, like you said earlier.
Yeah, it's
the
true.
2 to 4,
Yep,
right?
that's the
2 to
busiest
6,
time of the
yeah.
day, yep.
So,
It is.
what is the data with the library cards? Let's just say, so we can get a glimpse.
It's about 5,500 library cards who are Lunenburg residents right now.
Right.
When someone moves and changes their address in our system, what we call the home library, which is how we count library cards for Lunenburg, it changes.
Okay, so
As
out
soon
of
as
the
your
55
Lunenburg address changes to a Townsend
Right.
address, you're no longer a Lunenburg library card, so we wouldn't count you in our 5,500.
So
And that's
let
the
me make
approximate number.
the question more clear.
Sure.
My kids are adult.
Yep,
They have library cards.
sure.
So they probably are within your 5,500 number, but they have not used their library card in the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So out of the 5,500 library cards that you have, how many of those engage with the library on a yearly basis?
They're active within 2 years.
These cards are active.
When you get it, yes.
But you don't know how many of them have used within a year.
No, because
Okay.
part of what we do to help protect the confidentiality of library use circulation data, which is really what library cards are connected to, is the items you borrow. That data, after a set period of time, which is a relatively short period of time, it becomes anonymized in this library system. So you can't attach it back to an individual person. It keeps track of the usage of the item, but it disconnects it from the personal identification information.
Okay. I have some questions. You said, how many hours is the library open?
48.
48.
Monday through Thursday, 10 to 8, Friday, 2 to 6,
Okay.
Sunday, 10 to 2.
How many man-hours do you have budgeted within your 429,000, 446,000?
Man hours, so thinking like full-time equivalent
Well,
type
so like,
calculation.
you can give it in a daily base or in a weekly base, so, or even a year base, you know, so if you look at your schedule, how many hours are scheduled within a week?
If you bear with me just one moment, let me see if I can create a clear answer for that. So we have 6.75 FTE.
So it would be 6.75
Times 40.
times 40?
6.
So it's
270 hours a week,
270.
staffing.
So you are averaging, like if everybody would work 5.6 employees for every hour?
Certainly possible.
Okay. Well, I mean, part of your case for bringing in more people or hiring more people
Sure.
is that you want to have 3 people there at all times. And I understand that, in operations, you got to have
Yep.
people. So I was trying to engage that, how many people you have per hour that you're open. And it looks
Right.
like you have
So if-
5.62 people per hour that the library is open.
Sure. So we take about an hour before we open, where there's also staff in the building.
Okay.
We do have some staff in the building Friday mornings. That includes the director, who's salaried 40 hours a week.
Is the director into the 6.75?
Yes.
Okay.
Also in at that time would be other people who, makes sense. They have requirements where the work that they need to do benefits from not having the public going around. So our digital services and outreach librarian who performs a lot of IT type tasks. A lot of those IT tasks happen Friday morning. So there are a number of hours where we have staff in the building where we're not open to the public. So I would include that in the calculation of that.
Okay.
Yeah, also you have Friday night movie night, don't you? So that's
Absolutely.
another additional-
Regularly, Friday nights
Right.
are a popular program night where we have staff for an hour or two after 6 when we close officially. And one of the great benefits of the design of our building is we have that community wing where conference room, community room, we can lock that off. Staff can leave for the night and that group is responsible for that space. It's still secure from the outside. The outside door locks. And so, there's an added, sign off when it's outside groups that are using that resource. But we also do have programs that happen outside of hours. One of our biggest days this past year was December 8th, a Sunday. We had the artisan showcase in the morning where the library transformed into a number of local vendors, including a Santa who people could take pictures with, not just pictures of, painters, the Friends of the Library selling hot chocolate, and then in the afternoon, our holiday concert, where we had almost 70 people come, It was pretty magical holiday season day for the library. And all of that happened outside of library hours, open hours. Yes.
So, I mean, it's just you went onto the staff, and I want to have 3 people, and my mind is operations, like, making, a 50,000 square foot warehouse work, get 5,000 packages out. So when you went there, I went there with you. So, I would want to, like, if anyone who works for me and come and ask for more staff hours, I would want that breakdown of what is, especially when you threw it in the idea of we need 3 people to run the library. Well, right now we're 5.6, like these things need to be quantified, in my view, when you're asking for more staff.
Absolutely.
You
Part of the reason
What
that we
is
we
the
would
breakdown of these extra hours? How many hours in programming we're offering? It's just, I mean, it's just, when you're budgeting is I see it very much, budgeting and operations, when you look at it on a budget and you can see, you know how business is run. So when you say, I want to have 3 people, but you have more, you're going to have to explain that to me if you want to have another.
Absolutely. Part of the reason that we would do
But I don't make the decision here, so I'm okay.
Yes, part of the reason we would do a formal staffing study to bring hard data for that kind of question. I appreciate that, efficiency-minded analysis of what I've talked about tonight would bring up some questions that would need to be answered. Part of what I tried to acknowledge in that slide when we were talking about staffing and the request rationale. I think, anytime you're talking about the library too, you're talking about a lot of abstract benefit too. And although you're looking, at budget numbers and the number of staff and the number of open hours, I think there's a lot that happens outside of open hours, a lot of
Right, but
outreach.
this here is not abstract. So, we need to find a way to quantify, get this qualitative information and quantify it here. So
Right.
I hear that, but there needs to be that translation. The $34,000 you get from the state, does that go back into your budget where you spend it in the same year, or it goes to the general fund?
It's separate. It doesn't go to the general fund. It's state aid to the library that is for the library.
So when we look at this expense and your budget, there's another $34,000 that was expended within these lines? How is that money used?
It's not reflected on the appropriation.
Right.
And so the requests, there's no reflection of that.
So how is that money used, generally speaking?
Typically, we'll go back to the uses of outside funds slide for you, and Ezzy wants to jump in.
So that 34,000 state funds, that's part of our cherry sheet
Okay,
calculation. So it's not, how do I put this? It's not additional funds for the library. It's an offset.
okay.
So it offsets 34,000 of the operating budget.
Kind of like
So it goes back into the,
Chapter 90 type of
Exactly,
thing, kind of
exactly.
like the school board.
so exactly. So it doesn't
Gotcha.
have an additional 34,000. It's built within.
Gotcha, okay. So I'm gonna now hone in on the programming, if I will, because,
Of course.
I spent a few times,
Yep.
I spent a few years in parks.
Just a few.
Just a few, yeah. So I do appreciate the programming that the library does. I think we have a lot of government and not enough service to the people, and I think the library provides one of them. I do find that the programming line budget, the way it's spread out in town, is disproportional, because we have, the library is getting 15,000, the Lunenburg Adult Activity Center gets 5, and the Parks and Recreation gets 5. And it's, we're all providing to the town, but we are providing, these 3 groups are providing services and programming to, to different groups, to different times. And, for example, I know most seniors don't drive at night, and most of your programming's, it's being offered at night. So now we have that disconnect. Your space is very limited, to the wing that you have there. So I know you had a strength class for women, but, I'm not sure the library would be, and it was at 5:30 at night, and I actually own a gym for women, and I'm not sure that's my busiest time, so I'm not sure we are hitting the mark on that. So I think we need to have better coordination among these three groups.
Yeah, and I would throw in the teen center too. I mean, there's some overlap there, right? I don't know.
But we're not funding them.
Right, but we're talking about providing service to the town and
Right.
and some overlap in the, that service-oriented delivery.
Right.
So, I mean, one of the things that, moving forward, town staff is planning, Deb Goodsell, myself, Angela Clement, and Michelle at the club. So that's rec department, library, council on aging, teen center, teen club.
Right.
We are getting together, increasing our communication, and hopefully thereby coordination
Right.
of things. I think the other thing that there's a difference, a distinction between those departments. Mission, the library provides, free to the attendee access to information. That takes different forms. Sometimes it's the books, sometimes it's programming, sometimes it's a computer, sometimes it's just a chair to sit at. Sometimes it's even just talking to a person, friendly face at the front desk of the library. And that differs from what the Council on Aging tries to do at the activity center. It differs from what Michelle and her staff try and do at the club. And even the rec department, which I think has, generates some revenue with registration fees for a lot of its programs, is very different from that free access approach. So I think that accounts for some of the difference in funding. The rec department my understanding is generates a little bit of its own revenue that way. And the mission of the library is a little different than that.
I hear that, the mission, but I am looking at the people that we are serving. And I am looking, personally, I would love for us to serve more groups in town versus,
Absolutely.
just a few.
Yeah,
And that's my thought. It's like, if everything is under one umbrella, I actually don't mind. But, I think physical health is actually very, very important.
Sure.
And,
Yeah, I mean, we do, right now, Nikki's doing a weight strengthening type class earlier in the day. It's early afternoon, which, and the offerings that she's done as far as, those fitness type classes have been very popular. They've filled up every time we've offered it. I think in general, I agree with you. The other, part of that is one of our big goals is new and underserved populations.
I was actually going to ask you, I couldn't read what it was.
Sure.
And who do you see to be new and underserved under your mission?
Well, you mean like what demographics?
What's your demographic?
I think for us, for the library, I think there's a geographic distinction that we tend to see. There are parts of town that are geographically more related to Leominster or Fitchburg communities. And there's kind of a directional thing that happens. You've got places like Arrive, Lunenburg, those apartment complexes that are kind of serving as a place for commuters to live in Lunenburg, but are located in a way that those people, those residents, are not necessarily encouraged to physically come to the library. So I think that's, that commuter demographic is probably a big part of underserved or non-library users. I think it's also much harder to identify because the group is a part of all sorts of demographics, but the person who, when you talk about a library, says, what do I need a library for? I've got a phone in my pocket and I can Google anything I want. That's another big group. So when we do outreach to the past year, a good example would be the Artisans Market, physically down on the flea market grounds, down past Walmart and Hannaford. Not everyone we see, but a decent number of people that you might see at an event like that are not library users. And so that's a chance for us to talk with those people, start to identify and gather some of the data that will help us identify exactly what age or economic demographic they're a part of, where geographically they are in town, even if we can get into that part of the conversation. So for us, that part of it is a little bit of a moving target because the data is not necessarily connected to our staff. So we are engaged in trying to gather that data so that we can have something concrete, so that we can direct our services or attempt to direct those services to those people. I think another part of that effort is also identifying what those people need. Those people are probably not people who are reading books necessarily. And so that books is a big part of what a library does. What is one of the other pieces of the library's resources that we can connect them with? They're not expecting it to come from the library, but do they watch streaming video service? Can we introduce them to Canopy, which is a resource that the library offers for free for thousands of hours of potential watching? That's educational, it's entertainment, it's informational. Can we encourage them and inspire them to check that out for no cost to them? That's another part of that effort.
All right. And within that, the last, and I think of tax dollars serving people, maybe those people are not going to end up at the library. Maybe we should be running programs for them at the TCP where we have more people coming, from work and they need some physical activity and they're there playing volleyball or pickleball or something. So, and that's, where I think it's great that you guys are starting to work together, avoid some repetition in programs, and hopefully can work together to expand on thinking, it's not just you, it's, as a community, we should try to serve everyone.
Absolutely. Serving everyone is absolutely one of our goals. I think the idea of going to meet them where they are is also an important part of that, and that's I think outreach in different contexts, people use that word to refer to different things, and from the way the library defines outreach is not just marketing and communicating on social media necessarily. It's also going physically outside of the walls of the library to try to reach those people who are not necessarily coming to the library. So we are in the midst of expanding that component of our service. Home delivery, collaborating with Meals on Wheels and that service at the Council on Aging. That's hopefully coming soon. I'll leave
That would
it at
be
that
great.
because my brain just went somewhere else.
Yeah,
I don't know what it was. I appreciate your
Thank
questions,
you.
Anna. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Members of the public, maybe they have
Yep.
questions?
Absolutely. I hope so. Rhonda? Oh, come on. Got to keep me on my toes.
The only thing I'd say is that we obviously have a budget shortfall this year. We heard about the school committee and $3.5 million. So the question is, how do we kind of handle it as a, we can say, the school budget and then the town budget. It's the budget. It's the town money, it's the state money, it's all that. And so how we deal with making all the ends meet is really going to be the interesting part of the next month or so of deciding how we're going to, you know, what things are we going to fund, what things are we not going to fund. If it came down that the library, you know, because of whatever, wasn't going to be funded as much as even the town wants, but just because, you know, we got to do this and we can't do that. What would be the first, would you reduce the number of hours of openings? Would that be look at programs to cut, or how would you be looking to cut things if you had to? Not that you would, just so we can, because when people are starting to think about these things, they'll say, well, okay, well, we can, you know, we want to start to make proper decisions.
I think, off the cuff, for me, that's a little hard to answer. Because to hierarchize the variety of things that we do at the library, I think is a little difficult. You know, I think there are a number of resources that I would consider underutilized, but I think are a valuable asset to the community. So I think you could look at things a little bit in that way. When you're talking about those types of resources, though, they are library materials. They're expenses that qualify for that 16% requirement. And so I think that probably would be one place to look. You know, is our Morningstar investment, you know, resource something that we want to hold on to? Is that, you know, a couple $1,000s that we can cut? You know, I think it's $1,200 or $600, $1,600. You know, maybe that's something to cut off. But I think we at the same time, we also need to meet that requirement for library materials, because that, after all, is part of, you know, kind of a core of the mission. So when you're talking about a department like the library, 70% of the budget being staff salaries, that's a big part of it. That's, you know, by no means would I say staff would be the last thing, because I think part of the real benefit of the people who work at the library is that they are here to help people, and there are any number of ways that those people can help residents and members of the community without all of the tools at their disposal that make them so good and so strong an asset to Lunenburg. So it's a tough call. I think if you said you got to cut $5,000, I could maybe identify things more easily, but it would be a mix of things, and we would scramble to find other ways to still deliver those things, and I think that would be very difficult.
Budgeting is always easy when you're adding things, because
absolutely
do these.
Part of the,
There's
absolutely.
Always, in business too, there's a business cycle, and you go like, well, this year we're you know, whatever the reason is, so we're going to have to do some things, and for towns,
Right.
it's the same way. So this might be a year that might cause us to have to do less, because
Absolutely.
we have more money, but the money isn't going to pay for as much, so we have to do less unless we want to get more money, but
Yes.
we're not willing. If we're not willing to do that, then these are the options that are left.
And I understand that, and I think
Nobody's
Sorry to
right or
interrupt.
wrong. It's just that's the world.
right, it is the work, and
the world.
one of the things that has most impressed me so far about our new town manager is some of the language she's used in the meetings so far since she's been here, talking about having conversations and working together, collaborating on this process. And you know, this is one of the few opportunities where a representative for the library gets to talk about what the library does and talk about what the library could do, and the things that we would need to accomplish some of those great things. So there's really, you know, no expectation as we are making our requests that we get everything we ask for. We do have to make some difficult decisions, and since it is really the only opportunity for us to advocate for the library needs, we've got to talk about the things that the library needs. And, you look at the differences on the paper that we copied for you guys between our requests and the recommended budget column. There's some big differences there. And that's a result of having those conversations with the interim town manager while he was here, trying to capitalize on some of his long experience and expertise. And I look forward to continuing to have conversations and working together. Coming in front of this group, the Finance Committee, although there are some challenging questions, is every year one of the great pleasures of my job. I appreciate challenging questions that make me think, questions that force me to talk about what the library does and what we could be. I think back to a couple of years ago, and Peter Beardmore, who's not on the Finance Committee anymore, but always ask great questions. Mr. Gray, you as well, several years in a row, ask questions that make me really think, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the library and answer those questions. So
Before we let you
work
go,
with you together. Yes.
can I just have you confirm that you did mention before that the programming, you may have to do some creative programming changes to kind of lower the budget in that area, meaning your staff would have to make some changes, and you may have to cut some more of the expensive programs, robotics, things like that. Also, just speaking to my fellow committee member over here, just to be more clear, maybe you can produce those extra hours that people are working out of library hours to compensate for that 5.2, which I think is a little bit off. And also reiterate that you are required to have 3 people in the library. Is that correct? Can you confirm that?
That's a policy.
Okay.
So the elected board of library, library board of trustees creates policy for the library. I think in general that policy is on a level required to conform to town policy as well. But there's a little bit more responsibility in that elected board because of their responsibility for the library and the way the town charter is set up. Setting that policy is absolutely a little bit different than what a lot of boards do. And that is a safety policy.
Right.
All 3 of the priorities in that policy and the reason for that policy to be in place have to do with safety. Safety of the staff, safety of the public, and thereby liability of the town itself.
Thank you. I just wanted clarity on it.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for your questions.
Muir, how many
Yes.
full-time employees do you have?
We have one 40-hour, one 37, a number at 32, I think 2 at 34, 1 at 30, and then trying to do the math in my head, I think it's 3 at 19, 4 at 19, and then our 3 library pages who work 3 hours a night. I think they add up to another 19 hours every week between the 3 of them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any others while you got me? I'll always come back if you want me, but.
I just want to say, since I asked you so many questions, we love the library. You guys bring so much to the community. It's definitely very valued. My questions are not to say that those things are not true.
Absolutely. I wouldn't have taken it any other way. And if you're not asking difficult questions, I think you're not really thinking about the whole situation. And I do mean, I really do appreciate the questions. And I think especially the efficiency, where that's coming from, I think is really important. And I think part of the reason that between requests and the recommended, we kind of walked back on that,
Right.
that library assistant funding, because I think I really do need hard data to make those decisions. It is pretty abstract sometimes when you're you're not looking at a formal study necessarily. You haven't done all that work laying out the tasks that have to happen to get a book out onto the shelf, and all the other resources too. So
Sure.
I do appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Can I ask who's hosting the meeting on Zoom?
The town of Lunenburg.
If somebody's got to be hosting, I've been waiting to get in. I'm wondering if there are other people that are waiting to get in. What, do we have, yeah, but do we have other members of the public that may want to get in, that may have comments?
It said Lunenburg Public something, and that was hosting, and they were gonna switch it, but it never
They
did.
didn't switch
There were
it.
no options to switch host
Yeah, usually
from Lunenburg.
someone on the committee. That's what I'm at, yeah.
I'm gonna try to take it over if I can.
Okay.
We were made the host. I think we were made the host.
Yeah.
I don't know who did that. So if there's someone waiting, I guess we'd let them in. Yes.
Yeah.
Now we're in.
Nah, I'm into it, but.
Yeah, so we've let anyone in.
It's just you and me.
Well, there may have been other people. I mean, I've been waiting over an hour, so
Yeah.
we may have lost anyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Does anyone have any new business? Just a reminder, we have 2 meetings next week, Tuesday and Thursday.
Where will the Tuesday meeting be? Oh, is it gonna? Oh, okay.
It's the end of the month, so.
Does anybody want to discuss old business?
What's the agenda for Tuesday? Are we? I know Chris posted everything.
I think all the agendas are on.
Yeah, I don't think
On the
Chris
town
has
hall.
updated them, though.
Oh, okay.
Let me take a peek, because he just wanted to make sure that he didn't get in trouble by not having any
Posting.
agenda.
Right.
So, no, I don't see anything,
Okay.
anything recently updated.
Okay.
I mean, I do see the agenda for the 25th and the 27th on here.
Yep. Got it. Police and fire.
Yeah, and I think land use might be added as well.
Okay. When
The
is
25th.
your town manager's presenting her budget?
Well, hopefully, so Yeah, so,
Sorry.
good question, thank you. So first of all, welcome to the new members of the Finance Committee and those that were not here last week. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jennifer Warren Diamond. I started about 3 weeks ago here in Lunenburg. And as you've heard, we inherited some of the transition between the interim town manager and myself in the budget preparation. So that's why it was not done at mid-month as typical. We are aggressively targeting next Thursday to have a budget presentation. Hopefully it will be as complete as you have experienced in the past, but no guarantees. But we completed the revenue budget today. It looks a little better than it did. And so some of the conversations about, what the target budgets were, I don't know how we can really have those conversations fully without having a baseline of where our revenue budget is, and that's the most important. So now we'll be filling in the expenditure side. The revenue budget increased last week, and in looking at local receipts, we were able to increase it a little bit more today. So I've shared that information with the superintendent so that she can update her data to the school committee next week. And I think that what is likely going to happen is you'll get as much information as we have meeting by meeting, and we'll continue to share, and numbers change as the legislature takes their votes, as departments continue to have conversations. But understanding the difficulty of this year and the timing, so we have two things going against us. We have timing, and we have significant budgetary challenges, which I will say again and again, we are not unique in that. This has been impacting communities across the Commonwealth over the past several years, but this year does seem to be particularly challenging for a lot of folks. So I am committed to working collaboratively across the board with all stakeholders on this, and appreciate the patience and dedication of the Finance Committee as well, digging in. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have committee reports?
I can tell you about the Municipal Building Design Committee report. We've had a number of meetings recently, and we have come up with a proposal of around $21 million for the renovations and the 22 million, 3 would be the high end, 21.4 would be the low end, for the renovation of this building and the renovation and the addition onto what we now call the Ritter Building, which will be the town hall. There's still a lot of information that we don't know as far as the details, more of the things like, well, we didn't, for example, if we wanted to put a canopy on the, for electric on the parking lot that we would build, what is, that would generate electricity, which would be beneficial to the town. What does that mean? We don't have any numbers on those things like that. Just, we were talking about the library and federal funding. Right now there is, well, in the past there has been federal funding available for some things in building. Are those things going to still be there? We don't know. So there's a whole bunch of things. The numbers that we were given are pretty much, for the most part, not including things that we're not sure about, as far as we didn't include Green Committee money, we didn't include government money when, because we don't know. So these numbers might be conservative, meaning, but when you're building anything, and I am not a builder, so I'm not an expert on this, but it's, when you start digging in, then you find things, and those things cost money. So we try to account for those things, but not everything. there are lots of meetings that we've had. They're all on Facebook, and if anybody's interested, they can get some more detail. We've seen a ton of people saying, this is the first I've heard about it, this is, what are we doing? Why isn't there any community involvement? And I think I want to get this out if anybody's watching the Finance Committee. They're meeting, you can join the meeting. This is, our chairman mentioned that this is the only meeting where you can literally participate as not as a committee member, but as a citizen. We have citizens that are there during the entire meeting, and we were saying, okay, citizens, what do you think? So they're getting input from that. So there shouldn't be any excuse for people to say, well, I've never heard about this. This has been going on for a while. We've been talking about it, and we do plan to do more public stuff, but as of right now, we are still in the data gathering and phase, but we're much closer to getting the requests that we'll have for the for the regular town meeting for funds. And we'll see what happens.
Jay, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
Motion to adjourn.
Do you have anything, any
comments?
public comments?
Rhonda?
See Dave Passy, I thought there isn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's unusual.
Okay. I'll make the motion, we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave Passy is phenomenal.